a lot of people are doing things the way they've always done it simply because they're used to them. Whereas now, thanks to a lot of those new tools that are really coming at a very rapid pace, things can be done more easily and more effectively. And I think this is what we need to work on as a platform, both on CineD and MZ, to educate people to be more productive with their work. And I'm not talking about a generative images. I'm talking about making your life easier as a filmmaker, making you more productive, making you more successful as that, basically showing you the ways of working with those things in order to do what you do anyway, but do them more effectively. Whether it's automatic generation of subtitles and, translation of videos into different languages, which used to be a highly, highly expensive thing.
What's new in filmmaking technology this week? News, reviews, education, insights, opinions, and ideas from the CineD newsroom with Nino, Leitner, and Johnny Bahiri. This is Focus Check, the weekly Cinetech podcast.
Welcome everybody to this special episode of CineD Focus Check. Johnny's out today, but it's my pleasure to talk to one of our writers, Omri, live from Amsterdam. How are you?
I'm quite fine, Nice to be here.
Actually, I'll let you introduce yourself. Of course, you're writing for CineD. You are a professional filmmaker, as all our writers. But maybe you want to explain a little bit more about yourself before we get started.
Besides from being a photographer and somewhat of a filmmaker, mostly on the hybrid side of things that I don't usually share in CineD space, I also work in some sort of social media consulting to NGOs, some of them with somewhat of a political nature to them. And while I'm not a correspondent or I don't have any interest in actual journalism, I do delve into these issues. So while I'm not directly involved in these matters, I can see the way that these NGOs and the political sphere in general has to cope with several AI-based or generative AI-based applications, best or worst practices, manipulations, and whatnot. And I'm here to kind of share some of my experience in this field, maybe to put into perspective the things that we used to talk about on CineD, on how AI affects the filmmaking industry. I will suggest they affect much more than the film industry in a way that will manipulate or change or shift the way we mediate information to the masses, in a way.
Yeah, I mean, so the AI topic is a very contested one, of course, and as many of our readers know, I mean, this is a constant thing we deal with in terms of, like, whenever we report about any kind of advancements in any kind of artificial intelligence stuff, we get a lot of pushback from a part of the audience, and I understand why. Of course, we cater, we're all professional filmmakers, we earn our living creating images, crafting images, and it's scary. It's scary to see now we have software that pretends to be creative, which is trained on millions and billions of different kind of pieces that we created and many others created, and then makes something new out of it based on that. And it's of course not creative. It's generative. It's algorithmic, whatever. But it's getting better in its visual quality, and I still feel obligated as a site editor to report about these things, simply because people need to know about what's happening, because like you already hinted at, we see it already creeping into, like the newsrooms of newspapers and other journalistic outlets, but also any kind of photo, video editing, and so on. Now, and we have to realize that. Now, the thing is, and I think that's good, the pushback against AI comes not just from us, the filmmakers. it seems to be coming, and that's something I've observed over the last couple of months. It seems to be coming from a general audience, right? So whenever you see artificially generated images on, let's say, Instagram, whether it's video or photo, but it's still, I think, predominantly photos still, because they are more convincing. I mean, the generated video stuff is, getting more convincing every day. But right now, any generative AI that can generate photos like, Midjourney or whatever, Firefly, can already generate stuff that sometimes is very, very close to reality, or it looks like it is. So you see a lot of accounts pop up on social media that are sharing stuff, and they don't even disclose that it's AI generated. So and then the pushback is massive sometimes, which I think is great. And I see that audiences are not accepting this. They are not accepting to be fooled from these obviously generated images. Actually, they are not obviously generated. They are generated, but sometimes somebody calls it out, actually, who has experience. And I think that's why it's important to play with these tools, even if you don't decide to use them, because it kind of makes you more capable in actually discovering them and calling them out. And I feel like a lot more people are calling them out now than used to be the case when it came around the first time, because people are starting to realize that a lot of people are trying to fool you into believing something that isn't real. For example, just one out of a million examples online, but that you see those channels that are sharing photos and visuals of technology, or I saw a photo of a train, and somebody, like, the channel said, and it was algorithmic, like I didn't follow the channel, I just saw it in my feed. It showed the interior of a train in Scandinavia going through the landscape, and it looked beautiful. It was like a very comfortable, almost like the Orient Express kind of thing, but modern, and it looked very convincing. And I immediately thought, well, this must be AI. And I looked at the comments, and of course, somebody called it out. And you could immediately see how some people were shocked that it is AI, but many others immediately agreed. And that kind of, it immediately becomes uninteresting if you look at that thing. It's immediately not something, because somebody wanted you to believe that this is an actual train, but it's not. So it's fantasy, and it's not even human-generated fantasy, it's AI-generated fantasy, which makes it less interesting the second you see it. And I feel like this is not only for us professional filmmakers, photographers. I feel like the general public is starting to react in that same way. Now, would my mom find that interesting? Yes, probably. Because if there's a different generation that has of course a harder time discerning that, and it is very difficult, and it becomes more difficult every day. But as soon as you know that it's fake, that it's AI generated, I feel like people immediately don't accept it anymore as something that should be out there. Now, having said that, the scary part, of course, is what you hinted at, is kind of people using this in a political context, or generated images that are, pretending to show something that they don't show. I mean, we've had fake news forever. Just in the past, images that were like photos that were taken, for example, in a different protest, for example, were shared and then put in the wrong context. And then that's the way it worked. Now you can just generate an image of a protest somewhere, and then pretend that it's real. And I feel like what all of this leaves out is the scary part for me right now is more the way that existing like real images are manipulated using generative AI tools that makes it really hard or almost impossible to discern. For example, it's now very easy to change the background of an image, like, identify subjects in the foreground and then just select the background and have, even within Photoshop, have it generate something else. and then it's very hard to identify that it's not real, because the foreground is real if it's showing an actual person, and then the background might not be real anymore, and that's already harder to see because you mostly are looking at the foreground, but the background might give context, right? If you look at,
I think a key question we must ask. You were talking about your mom and that she might not recognize it, but your mom votes, right?
Yep.
like your mom, there are millions of people who votes, who take part in some sort of web-based or a virtual discussion, and also in actual face-to-face discussions, and they're being affected by these kind of manipulated or fully generated imagery. I think you were talking about the fancy trend. I think I just got it on my Instagram account from somebody, and I used to think that people would come to recognize these kind of footage. And I've just watched Monsters Incorporated, the movie by Pixar from I don't know when, and I remember watching it as a younger person. It looked so real. There's like the fur thing, and people saying that the rendering took days and days with all Disney's supercomputers and whatnot, and it looks so real. And I've seen it now. It looked like a computer games from the late 2000s, or maybe something like that. But back then it looked real. And I remember several other films that looked real and now they don't. But I think my girls also noticed that this is not real. But when I watch the early Star Wars film, or even Mary Poppins, with the layer of cartoon in animation and the layer of actors with the vapor lighting thing, it's amazing. But I think I don't see it as much as a manipulation, because I know these are puppets, these are animatronics. They don't try to convince me that this is real. And in other films, mostly CGI based, I feel like they think that I believe that this is real. And it's not. I think it might have been just a bit too much in one sentence, but I think what he's saying about the rejection of AI generated imagery is true, but it's taking part in a rather small kind of illiterated, like people who can actually read these images and notice. And sometimes even I fall for this. Sometimes even I and even you and even people like us who are very who have much experience in identifying the subtleties of imagery and computer generated imagery and whatnot, we fall for that because it looks good. And the other thing is, we usually watch it on a very low resolution platforms like TikTok and Instagram and sometimes Facebook and whatnot, but it's also always low res, and it also always like kind of blurred or noisy or whatnot. And once they get past this, it can be perceived as actual footage, but I'd say this is not even the dangerous part, because
just one thing to intersect here. When we do fall for it, we won't know, right? That's the whole point. We won't even know. We think we don't fall for it, but we might fall for it every day, and we probably do already. That's the scary bit.
I'd say sometimes we fall for it, and somebody like opens their eye, say, "Oh, look, spotting the fraud and whatnot." But I think that the problematic part is not in like fully generated imagery. The problematic part is like when I come to edit CineD article or a post for social media, I get some images and then I have to adjust them to the media. Like in CineD, I sometimes get square format images and I have to adjust them to 16:9. In the olden days, I would have to crop, or I would have to work so hard if take off the background and whatnot, just to fill the 16:9 and have the product fully in the image. And now I can just open the crop and Photoshop fills it up, and it does so incredibly well. I would have no chance of noticing an image that has been like how do they call it? Crop filled. They have a name for it.
Generative expand.
Generative expand. Yeah. I could have never find out that a photo was generative expanded unless maybe I would look at like pixel by pixel and know it has been, and then try to find out where. And like in one occasion in my other job, I took a photo from a protest in which we see a man walks in and there is like some fires here and there. And then I had to expand it just to fit the whatever it was. And then in the expansion, there were other people with torches and an upside down car burning. And I had like two other options that I can choose with other stuff. I don't remember what it was, but it would be extremely hard to pick this manipulation to anybody who doesn't know the original image. And I've seen images which I could easily recognize as being generated or Photoshop that people never like. In I think in the last year there was an image that kind of swept the web with an elephant carrying out a lion cub, and the lioness walks by the elephant. And this was like the worst Photoshop. Like on my first year of school, I would get a full 0 on such a job. And I've seen so many people sharing that image with, there was of course a very important lesson about life, about how in hard time the elephants help the lions. Like nothing of that sort actually happens in nature, but people want to believe. And we've seen in recent politics, and not even recent politics, across history, if people want to believe something, they take their guard off. And once they do that, it's so easy to insert whatever manipulation you want. And we've seen manipulations, when I was a teacher, I had this photo by the Soviet dictatorship, by Stalin didn't took the picture, but it was under his command that there was this picture with Stalin and two other comrades, and there's another picture, one of them is missing from the picture. There were no computers back then, but with some gray colors and very fine drawing, they managed to swipe somebody out of history. So they did that, but in order to do that, you would have to have so much power. And today, it's so easy. Like pay $9.90 to Adobe every month, and you have access to Photoshop or Adobe Express or whatnot, or pay whatever other company. I can't even keep track on the amount of applications that comes out. Not every application is Sora or LTX Studio or whatnot, but there are so many little things that can help practically everybody around to just, pull out something that we would hardly see.
We'll be back after this message from our sponsor.
1 Minute Tips by Fujifilm and CineD. Back when I started with cinematography, I had the privilege of working with analog film. Compared to digital stills and motion, it was way less efficient. You had to load film, expose it without any visual reference, and then process it. Digital is way faster in that sense and can get you instant feedback. However, I also started noticing that I would be snapping hundreds of photos or just rolling forever without cutting, knowing that I could review and edit and post. I saw myself being less intentional with my framing and selection, and the quality of my imagery started to dwindle. So I picked up a film camera again. Knowing that I had a finite amount of frames for each roll, I began to bring intentionality back into my process, framing each image more carefully. All that is to say, limitations foster creativity. You don't have to find a film camera, but set some limitations for yourself creatively. For photos, limit your shot count, or plan to do zero culling in post. For motion, look at everything as a take and a sequence and call roll and cut in your mind, even if you're filming documentary B-roll. I hope this helps you bring intentionality back into your work. 1-minute tips. Until next time.
And now back to the show. Yeah, so I wonder how the next generation is growing up with this, right? We can already see, this current young generation that is a lot more video and photo educated than we were at that age, right? Because I'm also a little bit teaching filmmakers at a university, and I'm helping them to craft their short films and give them cinematography tips and lighting and camera placement and so on. So I look at the scripts that they have for their semester projects, and then I help them bring their vision to life, essentially. And I can see with every year they're getting better in terms of the current. If I look at their third semester projects, they're so much better than what we did in our third semester in media school. You can already tell that, not in general, not of course not everybody, but there's always a couple of people in these groups that are amazing and technically better than we were. And of course they're lacking the experience, but that's why they do this. So I can already, just the image literacy is so much higher than it used to be in the past. And that's a general thing. Of course, it's particular for that group who decided to make a career in, moving images or in general image generation in any kind. But I think it's a broader term, because everybody's growing up with social media, and you can tell that if you look at, sometimes you get those reminders on some social media platform where you posted 10 years ago, and of course, part of the embarrassment is the quality of the images that the phones were able to take at the time in comparison to what it looks like now, which really dates them. But also just what we posted in the past, right? When social media was still a young kind of thing. Now it's a lot more controlled. Everybody's trying to, trying to format everything perfectly and put themselves in the best light possible and so on. And actually I see when I was younger, we were sharing a lot of stuff that right now you wouldn't share anymore, also in terms of images. So and then the platforms are always trying to introduce new features that get people to share the real life again. If you think when Instagram kind of copied the whole stories thing from Snapchat, it was an attempt to get people to post something again that is real, because it would disappear after 24 hours. So people would probably share something that they are not embarrassed about 5 years down the road, like, the old Facebook posts that are still on the website somewhere. But that changes also now after the content of those platforms evolved, and now even those stories are not spontaneous anymore, right? They are very well planned out, and it happens all the time. So it's not just the technology that evolves, it also the usage of the technology constantly changes. And I think there might be a new generation that is just growing up now, maybe our kids, that will have a completely different relationship to images altogether, because they will grow up in a world where they cannot trust a single image, right? They will know from the start, we will teach them, or they will be taught in school or wherever.
They will teach themselves.
They will teach themselves for sure that nothing is 100% real, or nothing has to be real, right? And it's interesting how they will deal with it. because we talked about our parents' generation who's completely disconnected from this thing and probably very gullible and easily convincible about all of this, which we see happen in elections all over the world as the general population gets older in general, on average. But it's changed, and you can see this changing, like the younger the people are, the more skeptical they are about images. And it will only increase like that. The question is how will we and how will they deal with it, right, in the future? My guess is that, and that's my hope also, I feel like social media platforms will crumble. They will have to crumble at some point under the pressure of all these fake images and fake everything, because this is almost like a tsunami that is coming for us. As it becomes easier to generate fake images, more of them will appear, they will become more convincing, and I think we can already sense the reaction by the audience that it's something that they don't accept in general. I agree with you, the older generation might accept it because they don't know, but I feel like the younger generation, and those are the people who are using those platforms tomorrow, don't accept it. So that's the question, right? What will happen? But I think like in their current form, the platforms will evolve too, but in their current form, they cannot continue to exist for a long period of time because they will just be flooded with this fake information. And whether they find a way to completely filter out anything that's controversial, I mean, but we talked about, images of a fake train. I mean, it's not something that, incites a riot, but it's still, or, the fake images of animals in nature, but it's still fake. And people should know that it's fake. So if the platforms can't come up with ways of actually flagging this stuff automatically, and it has to be automatically, because you can't.
Yeah, because the magnitude is
the magnitude
it's incredible.
Is crazy. Yeah, I mean, of course, or there needs to be a working way of this. I mean, one thing that Twitter/X works does well is this community notes thing, because if a community notes kind of thing would be on every of those platforms, it would already put context to everything, and I think it's only the community that can discern right from wrong, right, essentially. So this is one way of tackling this, maybe.
I think social media moguls, they don't have the interest of doing so. Like I've heard in a recent podcast of a journalist, of a tech journalist, and he was talking about how Facebook enables fake profiles, avatars, bots, whatnot. It's a wide spectrum of things, but they can easily what's the word? They can easily target bots. Just a minute. Facebook can easily target bots and avatars and whatnot. Some are harder than the other, but it seems as if they don't want to, because they want to broaden their audience. They want more audience, and they can show investors and shareholders that, look, we have more, the numbers get bigger. So the numbers do get bigger, but these are not actual human beings. And I think when you talk about the social media is going to crumble, I think Facebook, in a way, has crumbled as a social meeting place. And when I look at my old Facebook activity and posts and whatnot, it was a place that we used to come to have social interactions, and there were authentic social interactions in Facebook. We would speak to our friends, we would speak to our colleagues, we would speak to our peers and to our adversaries, and gain something that could probably work. I couldn't have gained it anywhere else. Like the amount of diversity that I met in Facebook, I couldn't have met anywhere else. Coming from a small village and whatnot, couldn't have seen it. And it was that. And when I see Facebook now, it seems like it's being like they're CPRing it. They're trying to breathe life into it with various methods, but I can tell as somebody who works in a social media agency, Facebook is not dead, but it's very old.
It's on life support for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of on life support, but it's for old people, actually older than us. And I'm 41, and most of the Facebook audience is my age and higher.
I mentioned my mom before, and she told me she's not using it anymore. She's 73, so it's become a very dire place for any social interaction. The only thing that still works on Facebook are groups. To some degree, like specialty niche groups, if you like a camera group or something like that. That's all I see, actually. Yeah, I agree. But that's, that's what I meant before, is basically those platforms, they're not like other technology products that are, you can keep updating and, like people will, if you offer enough, will keep using it. It's just simply the usage changes and the audience changes with it, and they just become irrelevant after some time. And that, I think that's true for anything that Meta does. Essentially, it's like, like that's why I never believed in their business. That it's always, it's the same is going to happen for Instagram. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. It's not like, I don't know, if you're a software company like Adobe, you've been around for 30 years, if you keep innovating your products and bring out new features, people are continuing to use it because it's always relevant to have image editing. But the social media stuff, it's just, it's not just technology, it's how people interact with each other, and they become more careful what to share and what not to share. And just this addition of those fake images that's coming for those platforms, and it's already there, but it's just much more is coming. I think that's another reason why those platforms are in trouble, because if people question more of those images, rightfully question more of those images that end up on these platforms, they will simply use them less because they don't trust them anymore. You will go there for specific purposes, like you go for, I go to Facebook specifically to look at, the Sony or Canon or Fuji group, and trying to find out if somebody else had a problem with a firmware update that we were finding, but a lot of people already go to Reddit. They don't go to Facebook groups anymore for that.
Mostly Americans, I think, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, there's going to be another niche for, but I think those fake images in general will influence all of that. But how, I think
it comes down to greed. I think it just comes down to greed, to the incapability of companies like Facebook and others to take a step back. Well, you can go all philosophical and say it's about the infinite growth and capitalistic society and whatnot, but I think it's a big what if. But I think if Facebook wouldn't have pushed commercials and additional users and growth so hard, it might not have this fate. But actually, I want to touch on another point about, I think it kind of overlaps to Adobe. There's this Greek socialist, Yanis Varoufakis, who suggested that the social media outlet economy is more like feudalism than it is capitalism. Like, they give you the platform, and you can use it, you can grow things in your field, but it's their field. And I think we can see it also, to a certain extent, we can see it in Adobe's subscription, and even in like places like Uber and food deliveries platforms and whatnot. But I think in Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, whatnot, the way that they change the rules from time to time without the users have any effect on it is very interesting. And I think this is, in a way, why YouTube hasn't been that turbulent as Facebook and Instagram have been. Because YouTube gives the creators at least more illusion of power, if not actual power. But and money, of course, they give the creator more money. But if I go back to where we started our conversation in the effects of AI generative content, I think that the amount of generative content that they allow in the systems with zero regulations is a problem. And as you mentioned, it makes those places distrustworthy. I don't know if that's a word, but you can't trust them. You can't trust what you see. And I think it's a quote. It's not a direct quote, but I think Hannah Arendt says something about that you don't have to lie. You just have to flood. You just have to flood the media. You don't have to convince people. You just have to flood the media with false claims, so that nothing is truth anymore. And I think when we talk about dangers of AI, this flood of misinformation and disinformation that makes everything wrong, that, this is my opinion, this, like, everybody is now entitled not only to their opinion, but to their actual own facts. That's a problem, because the facts are facts. And the situation today, when millions and millions of people believe that the earth is flat, and they have what to base it on, like a whole bunch of misinformation to disinformation to outright lies to base it upon. And it seems as like it's on YouTube. CineD is on YouTube. New York Times is on YouTube. So yeah, they're probably the same. So they can base whatever they want on it, and it affects global politics. It affects many things. And the ability of powerful entities to affect the algorithm that choose what you will see is so immense. And once you liquefy or dismantle the perception of what's a fact and what's an opinion and what's a lie, then all you have to do is just push more of the content that aligns with your agenda. We've seen just about a month ago, we've seen the Romanian elections were postponed or halted, or I'm not sure how it ended, because of alleged Russian dark campaign on social media, which elevated one of the contenders in the elections. And maybe we've seen it in many other places. We've seen the documentaries about Cambridge Analytica and the Brexit and whatnot. And these kind of manipulation campaigns, sometimes based on generative AI and sometimes not, has already affected our society. And with generative AI, the magnitude of effect might rise. But as you pointed out, there is also a very optimistic part of it, and this is that people are starting to figure that out, to point out sometimes the specific video as being generated, but the platform as a whole. The fact that people are leaving platforms that house large amount of generative AI or manipulations is very optimistic. I don't have any numbers, but I think that there may be an optimistic future from that point. I just hope we have time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a bit of a. I think these companies are finally becoming more under pressure from every side. They're under pressure from the user side for the fake stuff that we talked about, and especially the images, although of course a lot of it is still subversive and you don't even realize until it's too late, I guess, because you have been flooded with all this information. But like I said, with the images, I think a lot more people are aware of this now, and as we all grow older, I think this don't forget that now you have like I consider myself a digital, not a digital native, but essentially yes. I mean, it's like I'm 42 now, and I was very early at this internet wave when it came about. I was like 12, 13 years old, and I really dived into it very early on. And I think a lot of others in our age that now are parents, have kids, realize that these dangers, which wasn't the case for our parents. So I think there's a lot more attention to this kind of thing, and like trying to keep kids away from social media as long as you can and that kind of stuff, because it's dangerous for them. And I think that this is starting to happen. On the other hand, those companies are under pressure from governments more and more to regulate and to
So this is true to Europe. I think in the United States they're going the opposite way, which is an important notion to put on that.
We'll see, but in general,
we'll see.
It's a wild card. We'll see. In general, I think it's not beneficial to anybody if those if there's misinformation. It's essentially it might be a short time win for the one or the other political party or opponent, but in the end, everybody will lose. And I think it's only a matter of time until those companies, I mean, Google, for example, is now, that has different reasons, but still, I mean, they might break up Google, let's see what happens with Meta. I think there's going to be pressure for them, and it's not going to get any easier for them. But anyway, we're kind of diverging from the image generation subject, but as the audience already realizes, it's a much bigger subject. I mean, this is only part of it. But I wanna shift the conversation a little bit also to the positive aspects. Now, one thing that I always tell people is that if you talk about, the problem is when you talk about AI right now, people very often think about generative AI and all the problematic issues around it that we just talked about. However, when you mention AI, it's almost like talking about books, right? It's like, it can be anything. There can be books with misinformation. There can be books that are very educational, that actually teach you a lot about the world and actual facts, like objective truths. And there can be, you can write anything into a book. And the same is true with AI, right? You can generate completely fake stuff, or you can just use it for very positive things. For example, just use it as a noise cancellation for your bad audio, or I don't know, help with your design, whatever you need,
and the low resolution image or video, and then upscale it to lower the
it can be anything you want it to be, and that's the problem right now. I think we don't have the actual right terminology yet, or we're not using it in the right way. So as soon as it's like when the internet came around, it's the same thing. It's like a lot of people were vilifying it, and other people were lauding it. And it's like, well, it's like humanity. It can be anything. It can be positive, can be negative. Of course, it opens up a lot more opportunities, but also dangers, and that's true for every technology. And but artificial intelligence as a term is so broad. I mean, it's only entered the common kind of conscience when ChatGPT came around a couple of years ago. But it's been around forever, not forever, but for a very long time. I mean, what does it mean?
The recent leap that's gained all the attention.
Yeah, it's machine learning. It's basically computers doing stuff on their own based on what we tell them to do.
As camera nerds, we know machine learning from
autofocus
cameras as early as I think
face
even
detection.
Before the mirrorless.
Yeah.
Canon has the ITR system that used to recognize the scene based on a very low resolution sensor, and then managed to probably adjust white balance or whatever exposure by scene recognition. And that was before, I think that the Canon 5D Mark III already had it. So that's before mirrorless in general.
Now, I think we should talk about more the positive aspects, in the sense that I think a lot of people are doing things in filmmaking. Let's talk about our field of filmmaking or video production in general. And whether it's pre-production, production, or post-production, a lot of people are doing things the way they've always done it, simply because they're used to them. Whereas now, thanks to a lot of those new tools that are really coming at a very rapid pace, things can be done more easily and more effectively. And I think this is what we need to work on as a platform, both on CineD and MZ, to educate people to be more productive with their work. And I'm not talking about a generative images. I'm talking about making your life easier as a filmmaker, making you more productive, making you more successful as that, basically showing you the ways of working with those things in order to do what you do anyway, but do them more effectively. Whether it's automatic generation of subtitles and, translation of videos into different languages, which used to be a highly expensive thing. I mean, we're now starting to experiment with a lot of the MZ courses that we have. Is like the automatic subtitling is not perfect, but it's like 96% perfect now, where it used to be like really bad. It's got and then now you can look at it, and then somebody who's a native speaker can read through it and just do the last corrections, and then you already have. You kind of have a course that was originally in English, and suddenly it's available in 5 other languages or more. Because the technology makes it now feasible, because you don't have to invest thousands and thousands of dollars into translating the content anymore. You will still need somebody who speaks the language to check everything and correct stuff, but they won't have to do it word by word anymore. They can just correct something that has been automatically generated, which understands, quote unquote, understands at least a little bit of what's being said. And that's an immense workflow enhancement that people don't talk about, because it's not as controversial as generative AI, but it's something that affects a lot of us in video production, with subtitling, for example. And you can take it a step further, there's technologies, we haven't experimented with that yet as much, but you could even dub stuff now properly, where you can, of course, we always know the thing that comes to mind is, again, the fake, you take a photo of some famous politician or whatever and make them say things they never said in their own voice. That's the problematic part. But you can also use this as, for us, we are experimenting with doing reviews in different languages, just because, I have a technology now that can probably fake my voice and make me speak Japanese. We have the website in Japanese. That's amazing. And that's true, I think, for a lot of, if you think about corporate films, if you're able as a video producer to offer this to a client, and of course you need to offer it to them because it is scary the first time you see it. But if you manage to have somebody in a film
to grab onto.
You make them speak the different language, and that convincingly. And of course, there needs to be a remark that this is artificially, like the translation is not, the person didn't actually speak the language, but it is artificially intelligent. But people would accept it. Like if you, for example, watch educational film from, let's say, your bank. And you are a client of a Spanish bank that is working internationally, that has branches in your country, and I want to see it in English or in German, and I have the CEO talk to me in my language, or not even the CEO, somebody explaining something about the back end of their interface or whatever, I would gladly watch it, because it's much easier for me to understand, right? I don't need to read subtitles and stuff like that.
Let's take it to a very current political issue. If you as a country try to get immigrants in and try to embed them in the local culture, and you have the ability to translate everything from, let's say, German or Dutch or English to several native languages, that tool can be transformative. I can say, as a recent immigrant, the fact that I have Google Translate on my phone and I can see in the supermarket or in the business papers or whatnot that I get from the ING or from whatever
you
whoever,
can translate it into your language.
I can just translate it to English and work with it. Sometimes it won't be 100% accurate, but I have a friend who moved to Amsterdam 17 years ago, and every letter she got from the government, you had to go to her neighbor to help her translate. And let's take it the next step. As you said, if the German, English, French, Dutch, whatever government can make all its videos, they don't even have to make them in different languages. If automated AI can automate it on site, you'll just change the language and it will regenerate anything. That's amazing. It's like the Babylon fish from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where they put the little fish inside and he translates every language to every language. So I'll speak English and you understand German, and then we'll speak to another individual speaking French.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
I even have it on my action button of my iPhone. I have a ChatGPT, the voice command. So I press it and it opens the thing, and I just tell it, like if in a different country, you just tell it, well, say the following sentence in this or that language, and I will just say it in my language or in English, and then it will translate it into a different language and say it. So it's literally that Babel fish in a sense that, it will translate it immediately. But what I wanted to say, that what you mentioned is, I think it's huge business opportunities that a lot of filmmaking professionals don't realize yet. If you're able to perfect this workflow, of course, it's something that's available for a lot of people now, but I think a lot of people don't realize the potential yet. Like for example, if you specialize yourself into localizing the productions you do into different languages and make a showcase out of this on your website and advertise this to your clients, this is amazing. I think a lot of people will just immediately go for it. And you talked about governments, but it's also for companies, just the ability, the things you can do now in terms of translation alone is incredible. And I haven't seen any video production company yet specialize in this kind of stuff, because just imagine, look at your client list, and look at the ones that are active in multiple countries if you're a video producer, and just think about the possibilities for them. They might not even be aware that the video you just made for them, you could actually work on a different language version. That might be good business if you're an editor, or if you do the post-production on your videos. You should definitely look into that. You should try to just make them a little bit of a snippet and demo of what can be done, and either through subtitling, but even the actual dubbing that doesn't look like dubbing anymore. It would look like somebody actually speaking the language. That's amazing. And that's just one of many examples of how the technology that's just come around can actually make you more productive and more successful in business, in the video business. Because I think a lot of people, it's not, economic times are hard for a lot of people, and our industry is very much under pressure because of a lot of different things. We had the strikes in the US, the actor strikes and the writer strikes that are still affecting people there. And people are trying to either, a lot of people are actually changing the industry, or they're trying to find work. But I think if you manage to carve out your little niche in this field, there's a lot of potential still. You just need to be, people who are successful in, it's always nice to have a niche, right? If you specialize, the ones that are always in trouble are the ones that do everything, because it's easily interchangeable with somebody else's work, or maybe even generative, whatever. But if you find your niche and then you specialize in this as much as you can, that is truer now than it has ever been, with or without AI. And we see all those tools, we hear every day what they will be capable of in the future, but actually a lot of them are already capable of a lot of things already, and I don't see them used properly yet. I don't. It's just like you're using them for small stuff all the time, but you can build a business around that, or you can actually lift your video production business to the next level by leveraging what you have.
So first of all, I'll say that some people are using those tools to the full extent, but they're not the kind of people that will want to use them. Some offensive cyber companies and whatnot, they use these tools to a very good extent. But yes, I think as with every tech innovation and every, I don't know if it's even a revolution. I think it is, but I'm not sure. Well, some people will be left behind. It's said by what happened. It happened when digital cameras came. I started shooting weddings where a bit after digital cameras became the mainstay of wedding photography, and I remember the older guard speaking about how today every kid can get a camera and everyone can shoot a wedding, and I would take them, if this kid who just got his, I don't know, Canon 60D or 40D or whatnot and is charging half the price you do, if he gives the product that competes with your product, then it's not a technological problem that you're facing. It's the fact that your product is insufficient in a way. And us as creators, we must always innovate ourselves mostly, and we must always follow trends, follow tech trends, and understand the new tools that are available to us. The amount of written and graphic content that I'm able to create alone today would probably take 2, 3, even 4 individuals 10 or 15 years ago. So we can say that my abilities plus the technology have cost the job of 3 to 4 individuals. But I think it's not as simplistic as that, because, let's go back to the example everybody likes to give about the weavers and mechanized weaving machines. We all have clothes now. We all have like a closet full of shirts and sweaters and whatnot, because this industry was mechanized. When in the 1700s, everybody had like 4 shirts, maybe if you were middle class rich. So things are changing to both directions, but I think it is important for us to understand the practices that these kind of technologies enable. And if we go back again to politics, every legislator has to take into account not only the better effects of the law they're proposing. Like, let's say in every family dinner, somebody got very mad at, people crossing red lights. And you say, everybody who crosses red lights should go to jail for 1 month to learn the lesson. It's very easy to say. But then a legislator, like the one that we hope are legislators, they have to figure out what are the consequences of such a law. And I think we have to understand the consequences and the other use of the otherwise very optimistic tools that we use and make our jobs easier. And it's not like we can combat this. We have to understand how to adapt to this kind of reality. It's happening.
No, I think you make a really good point. It is like people need to realize that you can't stop technology. So even if you don't like something, doesn't mean that it will, AI doesn't care about your opinion. It will still come, and whether you like it or not. And it's a good example. I mean, Johnny and I talked about this several times before here on the podcast as well, where we started CineD, which used to be called Cinema 5D, in 2008, which, like ancient times from now, like compared to 2024. But it was the 5D, and the original name was because of the 5D Mark II, the Canon 5D Mark II, which changed a lot of things for many of us because it was the first DSLR camera that was capable, like you had a full frame camera that was capable of shooting 24, 25, 30p, which meant even though it was not specialized in video, you were finally able to shoot kind of controlled depth of field, like shallow or not shallow depth of field video on a budget for a camera that cost something like $3,000, which was simply, there was nothing like that on the market. I think the next one up would have been shortly after that a red camera for 20,000, 25,000. But even before the red, even at the high end, nothing existed. There was nothing. I mean, there was like, we're talking about 100,000 plus dollars, I think, for the Sony F35 that they shot Star Wars Episode 1 of, and looked terrible. It looked arguably horrible. The way and then those cameras, so it changed everything. And like you said, I mean, when we started working with these when I graduated a few years before that, we were all shooting on small sensor cameras because that was all we had available, and they were very bad in low lights, and everything was always in focus. Like the holy grail was to have the ability to work with shallow depth of field. So you use these weird adapters, 35 millimeter adapters, to fake this, but it always at a sacrifice of light. So you need a lot of light. So it wasn't something you would use on a normal job. And then suddenly the DSLRs came along, and as soon as you started using them with all their downsides, and in the beginning, like moire and rolling shutter was atrocious and all those things, but it still looked so much better than anything else before. So the people who, like the old guard that you mentioned that didn't jump on this wagon, they were left behind within 1 or 2 years. I was literally like that. And I made my career using these cameras very early on and introducing them to existing productions for TV and so on, when nobody else was using it at the time. And everybody was like, how are you able to generate those images? And it took such a long time. And that's when we started the website as a forum for filmmakers using these cameras for video specifically, where nobody else would take us seriously. And like you said, the ones that were kind of laughing it off and were still on their super expensive, like high-end broadcast cameras, shooting essentially, deep focus videos, they were really left behind. And I think, of course, to a very different degree, this is happening now again. It's happening all the time. But, even if you don't agree with all the uses of the technology, you need to familiarize yourself. You need to know the ability of it. You need to know what you can do with it. And even if you don't plan to use it, I mean, you are using it probably already. If you're filming, you are using AI, whether you like it or not, in some way or another. But you need to know what it's capable of and what it's not capable of, and where its faults are, so you actually can decide for yourself and discern, first of all, what's real and what's not real, but also for your work, you need to just, because it's everything's gonna change whether you like it or not. It's just going to happen, and it does not care about your opinion. So you need to be, and like you said, same with weaving technology for clothes, it's been the same. If you were somebody weaving high-end shirts for somebody in person, you were probably out of a job in the 17th, 18th century or later.
Or you managed a boutique.
The boutique, right. The niche that I talked about, if you manage to carve out that niche. But it's the same thing. You need to stay ahead of technology, especially if you work in an industry like filmmaking, which is heavily dependent on technology, which is probably true for every branch right now, right? I mean, I can't think of any job that's, unless you're a carpenter or, something like that, where
I think even carpenters now, the amount, the help with generative AI can help you with designing the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, everything is affected by technology, and everything that is technically possible, people will actually use, and it will develop whether you like it or not. So you better stay ahead of this. Even if you decide not to use it, if you want to be in a job, again, I mean, it's the same. You see it in the car industry, you see it everywhere, right? The industries that are neglecting what's happening are the ones that are going to be out of business tomorrow. So, and that's as true for filmmakers as it is true for everybody else. Yeah.
You throw me back to my second or third year in art school, in photography art school, when I just got my 5D Mark II. I think it was 2010 or the end of 2009. arguing with my documentary filmmaking professor, who is a renowned documentary filmmaker, that I wanted to film with my 5D Mark II, and he was giving, no, you have to do it with the probably Panasonic DV something, like a professional Handycam. And we were arguing, and in the end, I went my way and filmed it with my camera. And several years after we met, and I've seen he was shooting with a Sony something. So he managed to put back almost everything he knew about what camera should be and move to a much smaller, much more capable set. Especially, I think the documentaries maybe gained the most out of the hybrid revolution. But I guess the way that he did it, some of his other colleagues didn't, and they were left behind. So yeah, we have to embrace it. And about the amount of AI into these cameras, I remember I started filmmaking or maybe videoing stuff when I was 14 in a local news place one day in a week. And I remember going with a white paper to do the white balance and everything. And, just the fact that the camera can white balance pretty accurately on auto and set the exposure automatically. I have Hasselblad back there, which can do none of this. So yeah, it's kind of, it was called AI back in the days, the auto white balance and auto exposure and whatnot. Maybe we had different names for it, but there were photographers and filmmakers who said, nah, if it's automatic, it's for the
Amateurs.
For the amateurs and for
we
families.
said the same thing about autofocus up until a few years ago, right? Because it was arguably unusable for professional video, but that has changed, yeah.
I think Leica actually invented autofocus and said, nah, our photographers can manual focus, and then they gave it to Minolta, and I think Minolta were the first company to come out with an autofocusing camera. I have to check it, but I think that's the story. Because they didn't believe any professional would do. It was the same thing with color film. Like, photojournalists used to work with black and white film and would refuse to get color film because this was the amateurs, the family photos. And you say, you are a photojournalist. You have to you bring reality, and they give you color.
And it was the same. I agree. And it was even the same with sound movies. I remember in film university learning about classical Hollywood cinema, where this whole generation of producers and actresses and actors that were making silent movies, they immediately, almost overnight, went out of work when the talkies, they called it the talkies, came out, right? So because they said it's vulgar, like it's vulgar to have actual sound on a movie, and the same thing happened. It's like they were out of work in no time because, of course, people preferred that kind of stuff. They wanted to hear their actors talk, but the old generation that has been doing silent movies for a couple of decades didn't accept that, and they went out of work. So it's kind of the same story over and over and over. The
story
again.
of power of social constructs and the power and how it goes this way or the other way, and how people want to preserve their own power. I think it's not like the old photojournalist had any shares in Ilford or or in Kodak, but he wanted to preserve the way that they were working in, and I think everybody wants to do that. It's only a matter of age and maybe openness or progressiveness.
Not everybody. I think you need exactly openness. You need to keep a kind of openness, right, in your work. It's like at the end of the day, and I say that as somebody who's like also, I'm a member of the Austrian Association of Cinematographers, where arguably you have a lot of very old school people in there, as in all of those associations. And I think they, like many others in the like when digital cinema came along, they were very much, like a lot of the people in there come from film background, shooting only negative film and so on, and didn't accept digital cinema for the longest amount of time. But I keep saying in there, it's like whatever, whatever. Like if I shoot my movie, it shouldn't matter what tool I use to shoot my movie on. What matters is the quality of it, right? In our case, the optical quality, what it looks like, what the lighting and everything. It doesn't matter if tomorrow I shoot a feature film on a smartphone, or and it's a good story. It looks great. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the device is. And
if your film or image requires you to say this was shot on film, then it's probably not good enough on its own. So
yeah, you can still use it, but it's not gonna make your story better.
It's a tool. Use it as a tool. It's not part of the story. If I shot something on a Hasselblad or on my iPhone, it won't be the same. And I will decide to shoot some things on film and some things on digital and some things on large format. And today there is a renaissance of compact PowerShot cameras. People like the younger generation love them, and like the CineD with the tiniest sensors, they love them.
But you know why they love it? Because that's exactly what the young generation longs for: authenticity.
Yeah,
because that's what I mentioned before. They already know that everything they see online might be fake. So what's real? Using a camera that can do almost nothing. I mean, and even if we look at newer cameras that have become very successful, like the Fujifilm X106 and X105, which has been their most successful camera ever in terms of pre-orders. It's a very simple camera. It's a very, it's a small street photography camera. And we had Victor Ha from Fujifilm sit here a couple months ago, talk about this. And I asked him why he thinks it's such a successful camera. And he said it's because the young generation actually doesn't want a device that does everything. They know that their smartphone can do everything, that it can be their, like their photo camera, their film camera, their everything. But they don't want it. They want a dedicated device again, because they are longing for that simplicity that they are lacking.
The same thing goes about Instax. Instax does the same thing. It gives you authenticity in a way that a phone cannot. A dedicated tool with a prime lens sticked on it, you can't replace it. It gives you some sort of intention into your craft. And making images with a smartphone gets you the furthest away from craft, from doing things with your hands. And I think this is why Fujifilm succeeds in recent years, because they let you work with your hands. They let you do something that's different than the experience of just putting up the smartphone and touching this tactilelessness, the glass that has no buttons on it. I think even Apple went this way with the new
the button,
with this new little touchpad on the iPhone
camera
16.
Control button. Yeah,
camera control. Yeah, it reminds me of the Canon EOS R, the original EOS R with the new touch interface. Something. I think in the quest for authenticity, we would go great length.
Yeah, it's an interesting trend, and we see it already. And I think that's also part of the pushback against those fake AI images, is that, we want authenticity. We also see this, of course, renaissance of shooting on film for photos particularly, but it's only photos simply because of economical reasons. It's just simply not, like you can't afford to shoot video, like film, instead of video. But we see it on photos, and whether it's the Instax cameras or also even...
the amount of film cameras are on the market now is just and nobody is making them except for Pentax, I think.
Okay, well, I think we can wrap it up here. Omri, thank you for your time. I think that was a really interesting and insightful discussion about, I think, the ethics of AI. That's what sums it up. I think we we should probably look at this conversation again 2 years from now and see where we stand and how many of the things that we speculated about have become reality and what haven't.
And if somebody just went up to the end, I think it's mostly, we'll have to see what the regulators will do about it. There are some initiatives like the A2DP. Just a minute. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
There are some initiatives that takes a very there are some initiatives trying to address this issue with some big players in them, and we'll see how they'll work.
You mean the authentic image certificate kind of stuff?
Yeah, we'll link it. We'll link it down below. It's just a long name, and I don't want to mix it up.
Yeah,
but yeah, there are reasons for optimism, I think.
I think so, and the pressure is rising. For the better this fake stuff gets, the more the pressure will rise to actually find ways of telling authenticity and getting real images and we probably there's enough work for all of us, I think, in the future, as the expansion of video creation, more moving images needed than ever before, and I think more actual, real, non-faked moving and still images are needed than ever before, and I think people are starting to realize that they don't want fakeness; they want reality. Thank you, Omri.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And thanks everybody for watching. If you haven't subscribed to CineD Focus Check yet, we appreciate if you do that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you can get your podcast. Leave us a comment, give us a good rating, and you can always ask questions at podcast@cined.com if you have any comments or you have a subject that you want us to discuss and that you were lacking on the podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and see you next week. Bye.